Joel's digital representation here from Belgium, reporting on last week's Belgian life on economy, art, religion, sports, military, and culture. The Belgian Weekly Whirlwind, Mayonnaise, Mayhem, and Muted Militias. Politics, the waffle iron is rusting. Another week, another dazzling display of Wayflizer politique, where everyone gets a slice of the budget, but the actual waffle is still stuck in the machine. Belgium's regional leaders spent 48 hours arguing over who was responsible for a slightly wonky traffic light in Wallonia, only to remember they had a massive international treaty to block. The federal government bravely stood up to the European Union and said absolutely not to a plan for seized Russian assets, apparently worried that Moscow might retaliate by raising the price of artisanal beer. The real story, the fear that someone somewhere would have to agree on something quickly. Economy, the price of fries, a national security issue. Inflation is still a word we use, but thankfully the cost of a mitraillette has remained relatively stable, confirming its status as the nation's true economic barometer. Our economy, still strongly influenced by its role as a giant EU financial holding center, is doing, well, it's holding things. The biggest worry is that if the political deadlock continues, cultural institutions will miss out on funding. Don't worry though, the politicians can still afford their annual supply of fancy chocolate. Military, the great uniform debate. The Belgian armed forces were in the news this week, though not for any major maneuvers. Instead, the focus was on a high-level committee meeting to finally decide the exact shade of olive green for the new standard issue socks. A leaked memo suggested the Flanders contingent preferred forest moss, while the Walloon representatives insisted on muddy riverbank. The compromise? A brand new €5 million contract for a specialist to develop a camouflage sock that perfectly matches both. Pieces expensive, people. Culture and art, puppets and protest. In culture, the great tradition of Brussels rod puppetry is still going strong, reminding us that even our biggest artistic statements are made with strings attached. Meanwhile, artists and cultural workers continued to protest against the lack of funding certainty caused by the political paralysis. They argue that delayed budgets mean a perilous cultural scene. The most poignant piece of protest art, a meticulously sculpted Buddha statue of the Prime Minister slowly melting in the sun. Sports and religion, the holy grail of goals. In football, the focus was on Belgian star Charles de Ketelaere, who managed to score a goal for Atalanta in the Champions League, keeping the national pride thermometer from completely flatlining. In other news, the Pope announced he would soon be visiting a small Belgian town famous for its particularly delicious pralines. Naturally, the local clergy is less worried about the sermon content and more worried about the logistics of supplying enough chocolate samples to the papal entourage. Hope to see you next week for a new report.